Thank you for joining me, Tershia de Klerk, on Tershia Talks Trafficking. My talks aim to help expose exploitation, and we know that human trafficking is the exploitation of people's vulnerabilities. And it takes place when a person is tricked, coerced, or manipulated for the use of their body or for their labor. Human trafficking can take place even when transportation is absent. This reality helps us understand trafficking and enables more effective prevention of trafficking. The more we understand and grasp the definition of human trafficking in South Africa, the more effective we will be in helping to prevent and combat this crime, which is known as the fastest growing organized crime in the world. Today, I want to highlight sexual exploitation and how blinded we can be in the prevalence of it, as well as how easily it can be misunderstood. Back in 2022, a strong group of NGOs, activists, survivors, and professionals had to lobby against the full decriminalization of prostitution, and it merely caused a delay in the process. Now, we are facing the possible legalization or full decriminalization of prostitution again in South Africa. In an article by Brandon Null from IOL, he reported, SA is edging closer to legalizing sex work. At present, selling sex, buying sex, or making money from it in any way is illegal in South Africa. Sex workers could soon go about their business without fear of getting arrested as the government moves closer to the final stages of decriminalizing the trade in South Africa. This is according to Brandon Null. And I just want to stop there because we find, even in 2022, that the media had this habit of talking about decriminalizing prostitution. And I want to emphasize that this is misleading and not accurate. What is accurate is that the government is looking at fully decriminalizing prostitution in South Africa. Now that is giving us a much different and more serious picture, which we will touch on later. Null continues to say, the Justice Department said on Thursday, 9 April, that a bill to decriminalize adult sex work is being finalized. And the meeting held on Wednesday last week was to provide an update on progress after more than a dozen government departments took part in workshops to hammer out the detail of a new regulatory framework. He also says that the government has already backed decriminalization, once again, more accurately, full decriminalization, and it is included in South Africa's national plans on gender-based violence and on HIV, TB, and STIs. He also speaks on the draft bill for public comment in 2022 that I mentioned, and that the process was stalled after legal advisors said it was not enough to simply remove criminal penalties. They said the law also needed to clearly set out how sex work would be regulated. So this led to further consultation, more workshops, and so forth. And workshops were finally held in November 2025, and again last month, bringing together departments including health, labor, home affairs, social development, the police, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the South African Revenue Service. The aim was to decide which existing laws could be extended to cover sex work and where new rules would be needed. So once everything's concluded, the department will prepare draft legislation for further engagement, just to explain how the process would then work. So there will be a draft legislation for further engagement before approaching Cabinet for permission to formally publish the bill for public comment. And then after that, the bill would still need Cabinet's approval before going to Parliament, where the public would again get a chance to have their say. And this is where I want to emphasize that we as the public will have a say. And this was one of the things that really helped us in our fight during 2022. Also, in Nell's article, he says that the Deputy Justice Minister, Andries Nel, was reported in giving sex worker groups clear assurance as to what the new law would and would not include. And some of it was as follows. The assurance included that there will be no compulsory registration of sex workers and no forced HIV testing. Proposals such as red light districts or zoning laws that would restrict where sex workers can operate were ruled out. And Nell said that any local regulation would instead be handled through the same bylaw processes used for other businesses. And it was also said that sex workers cannot continue to wait for legal protection while facing ongoing criminalization and harm. This comment is the part in which most of our NGOs and professional individuals stand together and support. We have seen and have worked with survivors of prostitution who managed to exit the prostitution system, and also survivors of sex trafficking who have either managed to escape or who were rescued from trafficking. That yes, those in the prostitution system, those who have been either victim of their circumstance or victim of human trafficking, deserve to be protected. They deserve to not face ongoing criminalization and harm. With that, we are in absolute agreement. I want to emphasize some realities when it comes to the prostituted persons and the prostitution system. Some interesting points that come from people who work on the ground in helping prostituted persons exit the system, people who work on the ground with survivors of sex trafficking, and even those who were victims of the system and have managed to exit the system of prostitution. So some of the interesting factors that have been pointed out by some of these individuals, NGOs, and survivors are as follows: that it is not always addiction that leads to prostitution. Other desperation leads to prostitution, as many individuals choose that path due to circumstance. And of course, others are forced into prostitution through sex trafficking. And also, decriminalizing or full decriminalizing of prostitution will not take away the shame. Brave to Love, who works in helping prostituted persons, say that every woman in prostitution has her monster, such as, for example, a client who raped her. And another interesting factor, of course, is that sex buyers want to stay anonymous. And the question is why? Also, organized crime takes place in every single brothel in South Africa. Now, these statements are coming from people who work on the ground and in the forefront. The longer women stay in prostitution, the more they get into illegal activity. Also, when it comes to drug use, crystal meth is very common in prostitution because it's an upper drug and it enhances sexual sensation. We know that prostitution encourages substance abuse, whether legal or not legal, and it also fuels drug trafficking. The majority owners or managers of brothels are foreigners, such as Bosnian, Russian, Chinese, Thai men and women, and even Zimbabwean females. This is also reported directly by Brave to Love. And some upper class brothels have a doctor and a psychologist available, which raises the question, why? So whether these brothels are legal or illegal, why do some upper class brothels have a doctor and a psychologist available? The reality is that prostitution is a form of slavery. People's bodies are not commodities. It is also a known fact that women absorb most of the risk with sex. Men with dangerous fetishes also seek out prostituted persons. And it's about power. One of the very unfortunate aspects of prostitution that it's very easy to get into it, but it is much, much harder to get out. And prostitution is known as the last unrecognized form of sexual abuse. And some enlightening questions we can ask are, where are the women who had apparent options and chose to go into prostitution? Are there any such women? Women who had options but instead chose to go into prostitution? And also, where will a prostituted person be in 20 years? We see just merely when it comes specifically to sex trafficking that the life expectancy is normally 7 to 8 years. And this is, of course, due to various factors, which include abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and violence. And of course, STDs. With human trafficking, it often happens that victims are so traumatized that they don't realize they are a victim. And this happens especially in the sex trade. One would hear comments such as, I'm doing what I want with my body. But the reality is no. The truth is that others are doing what they want with your body. It is also very interesting to note that in some countries, notably Scandinavian nations, paying women for sex can get a man arrested, humiliated, and forced to even attend what they call a John school, where they get lessons that aim at keeping men from paying women for sex. So what exactly does decriminalization mean? Well, decriminalization of the sex trade means actually full decriminalization of all aspects of the sex trade, including pimping and brothel keeping. The sex trade is treated like any other business, and there is no public funding for services to help women exit the trade. Laws against sex trafficking are retained, but in practice, they are very hard to enforce. For example, in New Zealand, where this law is in place, the police are not allowed to enter a brothel without a warrant, even if they suspect trafficking victims are inside. But they can enter without a warrant to check a liquor license. There's little or no systematic data collection on the exploitation of children in the sex industry. Police are not allowed to ask a person's age, even if they suspect she is a child being sexually exploited. As a result, most sex trafficking goes undetected. And this would be one of the biggest problems that we will be facing should prostitution be fully decriminalized in South Africa. One can also expect to see small brothels opening up in houses and flats in residential areas, with local councils and residents having no say, no matter what problems are caused. Legalizing or decriminalizing the sex trade has been found to lead to a rapid expansion of the industry, of course, with more men buying sex and more vulnerable women and girls being drawn into the trade. There is an alternative to fully decriminalizing prostitution, which includes the protection of prostituted persons. And this is what's called the Nordic model. So what exactly is the Nordic model? The Nordic model understands prostitution to be harmful, both to the individual as well as to society as a whole, and that it is both a cause and a consequence of the inequality between women and men. The Nordic model has several elements. So firstly, it repeals laws that target those selling sex, and it provides them with support services and help to leave the industry if they want to. It ensures there are genuine alternatives for making a living. And secondly, it strengthens laws against trafficking, pimping, brothel keeping, and other activities by third parties who profit off other people's prostitution. And lastly, prostitution buying becomes a criminal offense with the aim of changing social norms and men's behavior. We have to remember that prostitution would not have existed if there was not a demand. And where is the demand? The demand comes from the sex buyers. Along with all this, there needs to be a public information campaign, education in schools, training for the police and other frontline staff, long-term investment in high-quality services, as well as alternatives for women and real measures to address poverty and inequality, of course. And this approach was first introduced in Sweden and has now also been established in Norway, Iceland, Northern Ireland, France, and Israel. Each country has framed the law slightly differently and with different degrees of commitment and success. I would also like to share with you from a survivor, in fact, in New Zealand. Her name is Chelsea, and Chelsea suffered many years in the legal brothels in New Zealand. Note, we're talking about legal brothels in New Zealand. This fully decriminalized approach to the sex trade is often held up as the most enlightened solution to prostitution. This is what she said about the approach when she was still trapped in that life. I'm a prosy, which is a common slang for prostitute. I'm a prosy myself, and I have never met another one who wants our pimps and johns to be decriminalized, or who wants to be made to pay tax on top of what the pimps already take, and to be given zero social services that helps us to exit, rehabilitate ourselves, get an education and a real job for the future, and instead to just be told it's perfectly acceptable for us to stay right where we are. None of us want that, even those of us who are here by choice, in inverted commas, because we need the money. We all want it to be temporary. we would all leave immediately if we could. Most of us are uninformed about government policies and have never heard of the Nordic model. So we might support decriminalization, but only because we think the alternative is for us to be decriminalized and arrested along with our abusers. Everyone who knows about the Nordic model supports it. I would give my life to bring the Nordic model to my country. Not that it's much of a life to give. Please keep your ears and eyes open for the opportunity to have your say as soon as this bill here in our beautiful country, South Africa, is open for public comment. In the meantime, please share the information that you've learned with your circle of influence, with friends and family. And before I leave, I want to quickly run down the 10 reasons to oppose full decriminalization of prostitution, which is something that I love to share and that I've shared in some of my previous talks. So 10 reasons to fully support the full decriminalization of prostitution. First of all, systems of prostitution exploit vulnerability. Secondly, full decriminalization of prostitution does not make prostitution safe. Thirdly, fully decriminalizing the sex trade creates a ramp to more sexual exploitation. Fourthly, decriminalizing exploitation diminishes law enforcement's ability to detect and investigate sex trafficking. Fifthly, normalized prostitution increases sex trafficking. Sixthly, prostitution is not a substitute for social security safety nets. The seventh point, street-level prostitution is likely to surge. The eighth reason, non-enforcement of prostitution laws harms disadvantaged communities. The ninth reason, sex buyers can be deterred. And the 10th reason, full decriminalization of prostitution is not just. I do encourage you, please, to share this information with your circle of influence, with your friends, with your family. We have to stand together to protect South Africa against this deep pit of exploitation and sex trafficking. Fully decriminalizing prostitution will not stop at individual level. It will also inflict harms on communities, residents, families, and businesses. Not to mention to our beautiful country, South Africa. Please make use of the tools and the contacts which are available to you. You know that the Joseph Movement has a WhatsApp line which you can use. It can be used to inquire about anything with regards to human trafficking, to the prostitution bill, and even to request assistance, or if you are a possible victim of human trafficking. The Joseph Movement WhatsApp line is 082 766 9870. And then also we have a national human trafficking hotline, which is a 24/7 anonymous reporting as well as a free job vetting hotline to our disposal. And that number is 0800 222 777. And remember, Missing Children South Africa, which you can use to report a missing adult or a missing child. And their number is 072 missing or 072 647 7464. Thank you so very much for joining me once again, Tershia de Klerk, here to help expose exploitation. And remember, if you suspect something, say something. Goodbye and God bless.